Welcome, everyone, to this episode of the Good Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Charles Good. My guest today is Joseph Pine, an internationally acclaimed author, speaker, and management advisor to Fortune 500 companies. He is also the best-selling author of the landmark book, The Experience Economy, and his latest book, The Transformation Economy, Guiding Customers to Achieve Their Aspirations. Joe has spent much of his career helping leaders see shifts in how economic value is created. His work on the experience economy gave leaders a framework for understanding why memorable, personal experiences became distinct sources of value. And now, in the transformation economy, he argues that the next step is helping customers create lasting value and change in their lives, work, and organizations. Today's conversation with him, we're going to explore why Joe believes transformation is the next level of value creation, what human flourishing means in a business context, and how leaders can recognize the deeper aspirations behind what customers say they want. Welcome to the Good Leadership Podcast. I'm Charles Good. This show is built for leaders, managers, and high achievers who want to think better, grow faster, and perform under pressure. Each episode, I sit down with leading researchers, best-selling authors, and experts to uncover what actually works, the practical tools, proven strategies, and insights you can use when the pressure is real. Because in a world that keeps changing, the edge belongs to those who can outlearn what worked yesterday, outthink what's coming next, and outperform when it counts. Welcome to the program, Joe.
Thanks, Charles. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Well, love to get some background information on you to help our listeners learn more about you. What got you interested in this work and really with this latest book?
Well, it depends on how far back you want to go, but I will say I started at IBM, worked there for 13 years, and I was a very technical person, a nerd actually. But somewhere along the line, this switch flipped and I decided I wanted to get into management. And so moved into management, to strategy. I ran a project that brought business partners and customers in the development process of the AS400 system. Maybe some of your folks there will remember that system from way back when. And sort of as a reward for it, they sent me to MIT for a year to get my master's degree. And I found out I had to write a thesis. So I immediately said, I'm going to write a thesis I can turn into a book, right? That's what I went there for. And that was my first book, Mass Customization, The New Frontier in Competition. It was a concept I learned when I was in strategic planning and got into our plans and strategies for the S400 division, and then recognized the promise of it for companies around the world. And so that was the initial book that I wrote. About 7-8 months after I came out with it, IBM offered my wife and I 6 months salary to leave. And I said, well, let's try and figure out if we can make it on our own. And that's been, over 3 decades now. And my wife's still not sure it's going to work out, but so far so good.
I love that. Thanks for that background. Well, let's begin at the highest altitude, the premise of the latest book. You open Transformation Economy with that premise that people don't buy what we sell because they value the offering itself. They buy it because it's a means to an end.
Right.
So unpack that for our listeners and really what business are we really in when customers are ultimately seeking change in themselves or their organizations?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to jobs to be done theory and other things that recognize that people don't want to buy a drill; they want a hole, and what they're buying from you is always more than you're offering. And it's really thinking in terms of needs and ends. That the commodities are the means to which you can make goods. Goods are the means for which you can deliver services. Services are the means for which you can stage experiences. Experiences are the means by which you can guide transformations. And whatever offering you're selling to your customers today, right, I guarantee you that's not what they really want, right? Particularly if you're business to business, by the way. And I know a lot of your listeners are, particularly business to business. I mean, you sell the end rather than the means, then you'll gain much more economic value. It's really about, you use the old manufacturing technique, ask 5 whys, right? Not of what happened in our processes, but of why your customers are buying from you. Right? Why do you want this offering? Why did you buy this offering? And then whatever answer you get, ask why again. Well, why do you want that? Why do you want that? Until you get down to some core aspiration. And that's the real reason that they are buying from you, is they have some aspiration. This is going to provide some level of support in their achievement of that aspiration. And that's what transformations are at the end. If you're in the commodities business, you may only get to the goods level by asking why. You may services, experiences, but the core thing is what change do they want to make in their lives or their business, and how can you help them achieve that aspiration. That's what a transformation is. And even if you can't get all the way there and really affect that transformation with your customers, you can at least, by understanding that sequence of whys, get more transformational, right? So that you can move them along that way. That'll create more value within your customers. That'll allow you to create more value in your business.
I like that shift from a product centric strategy to an aspiration centric strategy. The question for leaders becomes less about what do we make and more about what change do customers hire us to help make possible, like the jobs to be done theory from Clayton Christensen.
Funny, Charles, I've never used the term aspiration centric. I'm writing that down.
Well, once leaders see that distinction, then the next question is why do so many otherwise sophisticated companies still confuse means with ends, optimizing for features, processes, and touch points while losing sight of the business or life outcome customers actually want?
It's the easiest path to follow, right? You just keep doing the same things you've always been doing, not asking those right sort of questions that'll get you to innovate. And it really is about innovation. I always say competition is a search for differentiation. If you don't differentiate yourself, then eventually that means you're commoditized, right? You'll be treated like a commodity, and people will then only care about price and convenience. And if that's the way you want to live and work, well, then you can do that. I mean, you can be successful at that, but generally only one or two companies in any industry can really make it a go at that. So then you have to search for differentiation to go beyond what you provide today to figure out what it is that your customers are looking for beyond, again, those mere means.
When I've seen that too, and I love some of the insights that I gleaned from your book, is that customers might say they want a faster dashboard or a leadership course or more efficient operations. But the deeper aspiration may be to feel competent, gain influence, or earn promotion. So you have to move beyond those functional jobs to be done and understand the aspirational job, the deeper outcome that the person or organization is hiring the company to achieve.
I didn't mention Clayton Christian earlier, but he talks in one of his articles about functional jobs, emotional jobs, and social jobs. And my colleague Dave Norton, who's the head of Insights Consultancy, Stone Mantle, and I were working together on this, and he's huge in jobs we've done, very good at it. Is that we figured out with this transformation level that there is a fourth level, aspirational jobs. That people do have aspirational jobs, even when they're buying fundamental things, even when goods and commodities and goods, even at that very functional level, there's still aspirational reasons why they're doing it, and you're not getting the whole set of jobs to be done unless you think in terms of aspirational jobs as well.
And another practical message is not to throw out your own business model. It's to understand what your current model makes possible and then decide how far up the value ladder you
Right.
can responsibly go. So that raises a critical distinction that not every powerful event becomes enduring change. And you define transformations as effectual outcomes that change people, organizations in lasting ways. So perhaps unpack that for us because you have three levels of it or distinctions around that. And maybe what's the simplest test for distinguishing a real transformation from maybe just an impressive event?
Yeah. So first of all, say that we only ever change through the experiences that we have. As the saying goes, we're all the product of our experiences. So that's how we change. That's why transformations are a natural follow on in this progression of economic value to experiences. Some experiences are just immediately life changing experiences. We've all had those, but most of them are a series of experiences that take us from who we are today to what we want to become. And so to be a true transformation, again, that definition, there are effectual outcomes that change individuals, people's, organizations, businesses, communities in a lasting way, right? So they are effectual. They actually effect the change. It's not just a transition. It's not just a change in state. It's a change in identity that people undergo, and it's lasting. It has to last through time. If I go through a smoking cessation program and I quit smoking, but 6 weeks later I light up again, was I truly transformed? Right? No, it turned out it was a transition stage. You have to work with them to make that lasting. And it is for individuals, and transformations are individual in the sense that they change us inside, right? Commodities, goods, services exist outside of us. Experiences, for the first time, reach inside of us and engage us, but transformations change us from the inside out. So you're changing the individual in some way, and it's a very high responsibility. I want to point out when you get around mucking around inside of individuals again, whether people, organizations, businesses, whatever it is. But it's one that can also be very rewarding for you and for the customer.
Well, and that simple test for distinguishing between a real transformation from an impressive event or maybe a short term improvement or what you call a quasi transformation, what would be a test to help our listeners with differentiating between those?
Well, there's a number of things, and I got to admit, I mean, obviously, there's going to be some gray area, right? If I quit smoking, I light up in 6 weeks, yeah. But if I light up in 3 years, chances are it's changed twice. That I really did give up smoking, and maybe there's some trauma in my life that sent me back to, set me backwards, and then I have to change. So where in that, I don't know. It depends, but it is to understand that all transformation is identity change. And a way to think about it is, I was X, now I am Y. So I was X, now is Y. Can they say that? Can they? And they say I'm not X anymore. I'm now Y. And getting them to say that, to identify their own identity as having been changed, goes a long way to doing that.
And even though there are some that are temporary changes, they can still be valuable. A role playing event, an inspirational conference can offer a temporary shift, even though it might not be a permanent identity change, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And there's a lot of value from that. We uh, gain a lot of value in temporary things. I do call them quasi transformations, and think of role playing, of war reenactments, of LARPing, live action role playing. Those are often ones where we take on a role for a while and we're able to put it off again, and then become ourselves. And often in those periods, we can play with identity. We might identify things that we, in fact, do want to change based on what we did during those. And even and so it can lead to a full change. In fact, there's a form of LARPing called Nordic LARPing that is specifically geared towards transformation. That they go in saying, yes, you're going to take on roles here, but we're going to take on roles in a way that when you reflect on them, you can recognize, hey, there is some change I want to make in myself, and I've started that, maybe even accomplished that during my experience here.
Thanks for providing that distinction because I think that's a higher accountability standard, not did people enjoy what we created, but did something meaningful change and did it endure?
Right, right, correct.
So one of the most useful concepts I found in the book is how to connect transformation to time. And you describe a progression from time well saved to time well spent to time well invested. So talk to us about that and why is time not just price, convenience, or even attention, the deeper unit of value leaders need to understand.
Well, the reason there is because the most precious resource on the planet is the time of individual human beings. And that progression actually starts with one below, and I put red lines above it, which is time wasted. When you waste your customer's time, you are wasting a precious resource. And think about in your own life, you don't like it yourself when you're sitting in a phone tree and can't figure out how to get somebody that's really going to help you. We're in a long line queue at the grocery store, wherever it might be, because they didn't bring enough people in to be able to service you. We all hate wasting our time, and I mean, we do have this wonderful invention called the smartphone that allows us to turn that into maybe time well spent, or at least used as well. But the fundamental point is that you are wasting people's time. And so you need to first take that time that you're wasting and turn it into time well saved. Turn it into something that people value because you're saving their time. And that's the fundamental reason, like the functional job of commodities, goods, and services, is that they save our time. Right? Services in particular is do something for me. I could do it myself. I could change the oil in my car if I wanted. I did it once in my life. I could cut my hair if I wanted. It may not be as good, but I could do it, right? But if I wanted to really learn how to do it, then it would take time to be able to learn how to do something. And you're doing it for me. And I'm willing to pay for that. But you can also take that time wasted and turn it into time well spent. You think about standing in line at Disneyland or Disney World, right? They recognize that the value is in the ride, not in the line. So how can they can do things first to eliminate as much of that time, right? Where they invented being able to get on one side and off the other, so you're not don't have any mixing of people getting on and off, and so you greatly reduce the time it takes. They were the first ones, I think, to be able to snake lines through there, so you're people watching as part of it. They put up a sign in front that says wait time 35 minutes, right? Well, if they say 35, it's going to be more like 15, 20. But because then they want you, oh, that wasn't so long, and change the view, at least, of the time you wasted. But then they also create a pre show. where let's add value with a pre-show that's going to prepare you for this experience, and you'll get more value from the experience because you have this backstory and you're set up for it, and you get excitement and anticipation. Right, it actually increases the value of the experience that you have. So that's what experiences do, is they provide time well spent, that people are buying from you because they value the time that they spend with you. If I could do a little digression, Charles, I assume so many of your listeners are involved in measuring CX, customer experience. Now, customer experience came out of the shift into the experience economy, but generally it does not mean what I'm talking about. Customer experience is, how do we make things nice and easy and convenient, which are all well and good, but they're service characteristics. They're not experience characteristics. Nice is nice, but rarely does that rise to the level of memorability. And when we make things easy for our customers, we often routinize things for our employees, which gets in the way of being personal. And experiences are inherently personal, again, because they happen inside of us. And convenience is the antithesis of what I'm talking about. Because convenience means, let's get in and out as quickly as possible. Let's spend as little time with the company as possible. When with experiences, what people value is the time they spend with you. That's what time well spent is. Time well saved is the frictionless, is the great watchword. And that's great when you're selling a service or for the service aspects, like getting into at a theme park of an experience. But time well spent means that you're friction full. And in fact, that you design it with a dramatic structure that rises up to a climax and comes back down again. That's the only way you ever get a memory. If it's a flat experience, nothing ever happens. There's no memory. You have to rise up to a climax, come back down again, and that's time well spent. So then finally, what experiences are is time well invested. That each of those experiences that you are spending time in, you're actually investing that time with that goal, that aspiration of being able to become someone new in some way. And that's what transformations do, and where they value the experiences, and not always positive, wonderful experiences, right? You know the phrase "no pain, no gain." Sometimes those experiences are hard. I'm going through physical therapy right now because I got this torn labrum in my hip, and it's not fun, and I'm not enjoying it. But it's the experiences I need to have in order for this thing to heal, so that I can then go on and enjoy my golf game more than I am at the moment.
Well, that's great. Thank you for providing that distinction because I think that really we can understand and unpack it better that transformations create time well invested. Aspirants invest time in a journey that pays dividends in the future. And in some cases, I like how you differentiated the customer experience versus the experience that customers really want from your product. And I see this in learning and development. Our industry has a course may be efficient, but if it doesn't change performance or capability, it may not represent time well invested. Conversely, a challenging course or development journey can be worth far more than a frictionless experience if it leads to genuinely valued results.
Right, that's true. And it's a matter of designing the right set of experiences, some more challenging than others, that will get them from where they are today to what they need to be. But also recognize that it's not a monotonically increasing function. Right? Sorry, my math coming out again. Is that, there's regress as well as progress. And that's one of the things that learning and development often doesn't take into account, is that you've got to sense and respond to what's going on, and sometimes provide particular people help at particular moments, right? Lest they become lost, lest they give up, lest they not get the value out of it. And not just say, because this is our journey path, right? This is a set of programs you got to go through, boom, 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 boom. Not recognizing, well, but I lost you at the third boom, and you got to get me again before I'm ready for that fourth one, and the rest after that.
And I like how this transformation strategy really changes the core design question from how quickly can we complete this interaction to how does this interaction compound toward a future result that the person or customer values?
I love John Jurdy, famous experience architect, talked about experience design as the design of time. I love that. So every experience, you're designing the time customers spend with you, and the transformations, you're compounding that with time after time after time. Again, responding to what's needed and getting to the point where they get that time well invested.
And I saw also how your argument moves beyond strategy into the purpose of the organization itself. And you make the claim that fostering human flourishing is the true purpose of a business, with profit as a measure of how well a company benefits people. What I find challenging when I talk to so many leaders is what does that mean in practice for a CEO facing quarterly pressure,
Yep.
difficult trade offs, and competing stakeholders?
Yeah, it's a difficult question, and it's funny. I just got done before we started this conversation, Charles, with a new Substack post where I talk further about putting human flourishing at the heart of business, at the heart of every business. It's why business exists in the first place. No one ever buys your offering. Never ever takes money out of their wallet, their purse, or their account unless it's going to the offering you have is worth more to them than the money, and it's going to make them better off in some way. And the more better off we make people, then the more value we create. It doesn't say you can never fire people or you can never lay people off because there's things that happen in business that may require that, but you do it in a human way and you put the flourishing of those people as well as the ones that are left into that decision. It needs to be there at the boardroom when you're making these decisions, and recognize that losing short term profit is not the worst thing in the world if you're continuing to set yourself up on the long term to do what my friend Kim Korn says is thrive forever. Right, that's the goal. Is how do you have a business that thrives forever? And one of the reasons of that is you treat your people right, you treat your customers right, you treat the communities in which you reside right. And by right, I mean that you make them better off, that you help them flourish as individual human beings and thrive as communities.
And it's not a meaningful purpose is not a slogan, a mission statement, or a marketing tagline. It should be enduring, inspirational, and operational. It should shape decisions, help people determine what to pursue and what to exclude, and align those employees around something that's meaningful and being able to make a meaningful contribution.
Yeah, exactly. Those of your listeners who've read The Experience Economy, as I know you have, know that one of the core things we talk about there is theming. That if you want a great experience, a memorable experience in particular, that it needs to have a theme, which is does have to be as a fantasy like a Disney theme park, doesn't have to be in your face like a theme restaurant, but it's simply the organizing principle for the experience, right? That allows you to decide what's in and what's out. It's that two-edged sword. But when it's that theme encompasses the entire organization, it really becomes a meaningful purpose, right? Which is the reason why you exist in the world beyond making a buck. And I think every business, every enterprise needs to have a meaningful purpose. In fact, most every enterprise does. They just don't know what it is. And right? That it may have started out an entrepreneurial endeavor and they've forgotten what it was. You need to uncover it. You don't make it out of whole cloth. You cover why are we in business, and then you can hold that up as sort of the north star of the organization. It says, I know I'm doing the right things if I'm helping make this happen. Then obviously, fostering human flourishing needs to be implicit, if not explicit, within that theme. I often work with clients and I help them uncover their theme and write it out, and then write a page and a half or 2 pages of prose, or as a declaration that puts meat on the bones. And in there, I want to put in how does this foster human flourishing? How does this make a difference in our customers' lives as opposed to we're just selling them stuff, right? Once you just think your attitude is selling them stuff, you're commoditizing yourself. And employees, again, are an integral part of that as well. That you ideally you apply the same theme that you have for your interactions with your customers to your employees so that they have the wherewithal to create great experiences, to guide effectual transformations, and make a difference in the lives of every customer.
Well said. Well, let's make flourishing more concrete. And you organize transformation around four spheres: health and well being, wealth and prosperity, knowledge and wisdom, and purpose and meaning. Which one of those spheres, from your experience, do you think business leaders systematically underappreciate the most, and why?
Yeah, the last one, right? Purpose and me. I mean, so the healthy, wealthy, wise comes from obviously Ben Franklin's phrase about being healthy, wealthy, wise. And I've said for a long time that that any business is in the business of helping people be healthy, wealthy, and wise is in the transformation business. I mean, the three biggest transformation business: healthcare, financial services, and educational institutions. But it's more than that, that it's not just about health care, it's about health and well-being, right? Health being the means to which well-being is the end. Not just getting from sick to well, but I have well-being in my life. It's not just financial services, but it is wealth and prosperity. Wealth being the means to which prosperity, how I use my wealth and live a good life, is the real meaning. And then it's not just about educational institutions, but knowledge and wisdom, right? Ben Franklin, and actually an old English proverb, didn't consider is purpose and meaning, right? Purpose being to have meaning in our life, because Meaning is fundamental. Of all of those, it's the most fundamental, right? You heard of Maslow's hierarchy, and like meaning, self transit at the top. No, 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 it's at the bottom, right? Without meaning, we cannot exist, right? It's below safety and clothing and all of that. And so we seek meaning in what we buy. We seek meaning in who we work for as well, and probably more so in who we work for. So it's why the meaningful purpose also then provide. That's why the word meaningful is in there. It provides meaning to every worker in the organization, right? And that's a key way that we find purpose, and we or find meaning. And we recognize that for our customers as well, is how can we help them find meaning in what they're buying, meaning in what they're doing, often in thinking about where they are interacting with other human beings, most notably their family, but even others, is where a lot of meaning comes out of.
When you mentioned too, what you just alluded to as well, these four spheres are not separate verticals. Health can enable well being, wealth can enable prosperity and freedom, knowledge can enable wisdom and better decisions, purpose, enabling meaning. Each sphere overlaps one another, correct? And transformation businesses, they usually operate in more than one sphere.
Right, that's correct. And that's why I call them sphere versus industry. Right. I didn't want to use an industrial word like industry. I wanted it to be amorphous, to recognize they all overlap. I draw them as like this flower petal of Venn diagram, and human flourishing is in the middle. Right, that all four of them help human flourishing. And if you do well at all four of those, then you will have flourish in your life. But you're almost always affecting more than one sphere. And so one of the tools I take people through is to think about all four spheres. You look at where your center of gravity is, where I might be, but then how do I reach out to the others? How do I recognize the effect that I can have in these others? And then use that as a way to think differently about your current offerings, about developing offerings that make a difference for your customers.
Why should leaders care about the type and the scale of the aspiration before they design the offering? Because I would argue that people just go right into designing that offering.
It's to some degree it's possible, particularly if you already have a good set of customers. You can ask the five whys, you can understand, and you get a good idea of what they're aspiring to become, and it's something you feel like you can handle, then you can just go right in it without thinking about it. Uh, if it's more subtle, if it's a new business, then it can be very helpful to think about the types of aspirations that people have. And it's basically whether it's a small scale aspiration or a large scale aspiration, whether it's a change in degree or a change in kind, is the way to think about it. So small scale changes in degree are refinements that I already have some level of identity. You're not changing that identity, but you are enhancing what I have. Like, so I'm a mediocre golfer, make me into a good golfer, is an example. Or I'm a novice cigar smoker. I like cigars, but I don't know that much about them. Turn me into a more of a cigar aficionado and so forth. So they're more small scale. It's something that isn't part of your core identity, but is important to you, at least at the time you're looking for that transformation. But if it's a large scale change, that's where it becomes an ambition. Have an ambition. Maybe I want to become a single digit handicap golfer. Maybe it's I'm a manager. I want to get promoted, or a worker. I wanted to move into management. It's a higher level. Well, that what I might call actually a change in kind. If you're going from non-manager to manager, but I'm an executive. I want to get to higher levels, and so I'm looking at my listening skills. I'm looking at my strategy skills. I'm developing a set of skills that are far beyond what it was before. Right, that's an ambition. Then it was a small scale change in kind. I call that a cultivation, right? So I'm not a gardener, but I like flowers, and maybe I want to become a gardener. So I can say I wasn't a gardener, now I am a gardener. But again, it's not core to my identity; it's something I do on the side, and that's a cultivation. And then finally, the big scary word, large scale change in kind, is metamorphosis. And I already think transformation is a scary, big, scary enough word. I was looking for something else, but there is no other word for it, right? And there's a lot of literature and philosophy and so forth that I've worked with that use the term metamorphosis. So it's a wholesale change, and that's primarily the biggest thing to understand, right? As a business, is it metamorphosis or is it one of the others? If it's metamorphosis, there's a heck of a lot more you got to do than with the others. And it sort of incorporates all those. If you need metamorphosis, you can do any of those others. But if you're just working on refinement, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can take somebody and totally change them and alter their lives or alter their businesses with the metamorphosis. And all these, again, are not just individuals, but employees, organizations, businesses that you can do. And so understanding which of those can help you figure out what it is that you want to do and how to go about it. And they each have different types of guiding, right? The guide is the economic function of transformations, like you deliver services, stage experiences, guide transformations.
I like those two dimensions, and thank you for that unpacking because that's really the antidote to this one size fits all transformation claim. So, before designing the journey, diagnose the kind of change the person or the organization actually seeks, and it's going to be more effective as a result. Thank you so much, Joe. This has been a masterclass in moving from the idea of transformation to the practical work of designing it. Remind our listeners how they get in contact with you and learn more about your work.
So you can connect with me on LinkedIn, Joe Pine, very simple. Our website is strategichorizons.com, strategic horizons with an S.com. And you can learn all about our offerings there. And I also mentioned that I actually wrote the book, The Transformation Economy, on Substack, right? So you can actually get 125% of the book because I had to edit it down, right? On Substack today. And I continue to write on there with new ideas, new thoughts, new exemplars of what's going on in the transformation economy. So it's a great resource for learning.
Thank you so much for joining me today. And for everyone listening, the challenge is clear. Do not ask only whether people enjoy the experience you created. Ask whether you help them achieve an outcome that matters and whether that change will still be visible after the moment passed. With that, thank you for joining me on the Good Leadership Podcast. And until next time, remember, it's not what you know, but what you do consistently that makes a difference. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Good Leadership Podcast. Remember, great ideas only matter when they change what you do next. So choose one insight from today's conversation and put it into practice this week. If this episode was valuable, follow the show and share it with someone who would benefit. And until next time, remember, the edge belongs to those who outlearned what worked yesterday, who can outthink what's coming next so that they can outperform when it counts.